No one expected this night to turn into a mystery, but now it might be one of the most disturbing stories yet. Because what Porsha Williams said didn't just raise eyebrows, it triggered a chain reaction no one saw coming. She claimed she doesn't remember what happened that night. Not clearly. Not fully. Just fragments, shadows, silence. But here's where everything starts to fall apart. Because while she says she doesn't know, the story somehow keeps getting more specific. And now, after staying silent for so long, Todd has finally spoken. Not calmly, not carefully, but in a way that's raising even more questions than answers. And just when people thought the situation couldn't get any more confusing, Tasha K steps in. And what she's suggesting, it's not just controversial, it's explosive. Suddenly, this isn't just about one night anymore. It's about what really happened, who knows the truth, and who might be hiding it. Because if no one remembers clearly, then why does it feel like everyone already has a version of the story? And more importantly, what if the truth was never meant to come out at all? This didn't start overnight. What you're seeing now, the confusion, the accusations, the tension building across social media, this has been brewing for a long time. And if you look closely, the signs were always there. Because Porsha Williams has never been a stranger to controversy. From past public fallouts to emotional confrontations that played out in front of millions, her name has often been surrounded by drama that never fully settles. Every time things seem to calm down, something pulls her right back into the spotlight. And this time, it feels different. This time, it feels darker. But to understand why this situation exploded the way it did, you have to look at the people around her. Because Todd wasn't just some random name dragged into the story. He was there. Not at the center of what allegedly happened, but close enough that people immediately started asking questions the moment Porsha spoke. Close enough that his silence didn't go unnoticed. And in situations like this silence, it doesn't protect you. It makes you a target. At first, Todd didn't say anything. No interviews. No social media statements. Nothing. And that silence created a vacuum. A space where speculation started growing fast. People began connecting dots that may or may not have even existed. Old clips resurfaced. Past interactions were suddenly being reanalyzed. Every look, every moment, every detail turned into evidence by an audience desperate for answers. And then, there's Tasha K. A name that always seems to appear right when things are about to spiral completely out of control. Known for stepping into controversies and asking the questions others avoid, Tasha didn't just react to the situation, she amplified it. Her commentary didn't calm the chaos, it fed it. Because instead of clarity, she introduced something far more dangerous. Doubt. She didn't confirm anything. She didn't deny anything. But the way she framed her questions, the tone, the timing, it made people stop and think. What if there's more to this story than what we're being told? And that's all it takes. Because once doubt enters the narrative, everything starts to shift. Suddenly, Porsha's emotional account, her confusion, her claim that she doesn't remember, doesn't just feel vulnerable anymore. To some people, it starts to feel incomplete. And in the world of viral stories, incomplete is dangerous. Because people don't like unanswered questions. They fill them. And that's exactly what started happening. Online discussions turned into heated debates. Supporters rushed to defend Porsha, calling out anyone who questioned her version of events. But on the other side, skeptics started pointing out inconsistencies. They asked, if she doesn't remember, how does she remember enough to describe what happened afterward? If the night was truly a blur, why do certain details feel so specific? And if everything is unclear, why does the story feel like it's pointing somewhere? These weren't quiet questions either. They were loud, repeated, shared across platforms, turning into threads, videos, breakdowns, each one adding another layer to a story that was already spiraling out of control. And right in the middle of all of it, Todd was still silent, which only made things worse. Because now, the narrative wasn't just about what happened to Porsha anymore. It became about who knew what, and who wasn't saying it. People started assuming. They assumed Todd must know more than he was admitting. They assumed his silence meant guilt. They assumed his absence at key moments wasn't a coincidence, but a choice. And once those assumptions take hold, they're almost impossible to undo. But here's the part no one was prepared for. Just when the pressure reached its peak, when the accusations, the speculation, the endless theories couldn't get any louder, Todd finally spoke. And instead of clearing things up, he said something that made everything 10 times worse. Because according to him, the story everyone believed wasn't the real story at all. And the moment those words hit the internet, everything changed. The moment Todd finally broke his silence, everything shifted. Not slowly, not carefully, instantly. Because people expected him to defend himself, maybe clarify a few details, maybe even show support for Porsha Williams. But that's not what happened. Instead, Todd came forward with a version of the night that felt completely different. And the internet froze. According to him, the entire birthday night narrative, it never existed the way it was described. No decorations, no planned celebration, no emotional gatherings centered around anything meaningful. Just random plans, random movement, people going from one place to another with no real structure. And that detail alone, it cracked the story wide open. Because if the foundation of the night wasn't accurate, then what else wasn't? But Todd didn't stop there. He went deeper. He described moments that made him uncomfortable, subtle at first, but impossible to ignore. Energy shifts. Interactions that felt too close. A dynamic between people in the room that didn't match the innocent tone later presented. He didn't accuse. He didn't directly blame. But the way he described it, it planted a seed. A dangerous one. Because now people weren't just questioning what happened. They were questioning what was already happening before anything went wrong. And then came the part that changed everything. Todd revealed the exact moment he decided to leave. Not because of an argument. Not because something dramatic happened. But because he felt like he shouldn't be there anymore. He described seeing behavior, familiarity, closeness, that made him feel like an outsider in a situation that suddenly felt private. So he made a choice. He left. Simple. Or at least, it should have been. Because that one decision? It split the story into two completely different realities. On one side, Porsha Williams later saying she doesn't know what happened, waking up confused, hurt, unable to explain the night. And on the other, Todd insisting he wasn't even there when anything could have happened. Two timelines, two perspectives, zero overlap. And right in the middle of that gap, the internet stepped in and filled it with assumptions. But here's where the tension explodes. Because Todd didn't just defend his absence. He questioned the story itself. He pointed out something that instantly caught attention. If the night ended in something so serious, so dangerous, so life-altering, then why didn't the reaction match the severity? Why no immediate emergency response? Why no clear timeline? Why did the story appear later fragmented, emotional, but still somehow structured enough to suggest something specific? He didn't say she was lying. He said something worse. It doesn't make sense. And that single statement? It hit harder than any accusation. Because now, the narrative wasn't just emotional anymore. It became logical. And once people start analyzing instead of reacting, everything changes. But just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get more intense, something unexpected happened. Because while Todd's version was spreading fast, someone else was watching. Someone who wasn't ready to stay quiet. And when she finally spoke, she didn't take sides. She didn't calm the situation. She made it explode. Because Tasha K was about to ask the one question no one was ready to answer. The moment Tasha K stepped in, the entire tone of the story changed. Up until now, people were divided, but still guessing. Still choosing sides based on emotion. But Tasha? She didn't react emotionally. She reacted strategically. And that's what made it dangerous. Instead of defending Porsha Williams, instead of attacking Todd, she did something far more unsettling. She started asking questions. Not loud, not chaotic, but precise, calculated. And each one felt like it was pulling the story apart piece by piece. It started with a simple post, short, almost casual. If she doesn't remember who told the story, that was it. No accusations. No names. But within minutes, it was everywhere. Screenshots. Reposts. Reactions. Because that one question? It forced people to stop thinking emotionally and start thinking critically. And once that shift happened, the narrative began to crack. Tasha followed up quickly. Another post. Another layer. Details don't appear out of nowhere. Somebody always knows something. Now the tension wasn't just about what happened that night. It became about who filled in the blanks. Because suddenly, people weren't just asking what Porsha experienced. They were asking, backhand index pointing-ite who shaped the version we're hearing now? Backhand index pointing-ite who added the details that turned confusion into a full story? Backhand index pointing right, and why do some parts feel clear while others are completely missing? And just like that, the internet flipped. Supporters who were once defending Porsha without hesitation started pausing. Skeptics became louder. Threads started appearing, long, detailed breakdowns comparing every version of events. Timelines were built. Clips were replayed. Old interviews resurfaced. And something strange started happening. People began noticing inconsistencies. Small at first. A detail here. A shift in wording there. But the more they looked, the more it didn't line up. Then came the moment that pushed everything over the edge. A so-called insider source surfaced. No verified identity. No official confirmation. But the claim? It spread like wildfire. The source alleged that the night didn't just involve confusion. It involved multiple people, conflicting accounts, and a version of events that was never meant to go public. And according to this leak, there were details intentionally left out. Not forgotten. Left out. That distinction? It changed everything. Because now, the question wasn't, what happened that night? It became, what are we not being told, and why? And as this theory gained traction, something even more unsettling happened. People started going back to Todd's words, replaying his tone, reanalyzing his hesitation. Because suddenly, his version didn't just sound defensive. It started to sound calculated, like someone choosing his words very carefully. Not to lie, but to avoid saying too much. And if that was true, then this story was bigger than anyone thought. Because now there were 3 possibilities. Porsha doesn't remember, and the truth is missing. Todd knows more, and isn't saying it. Or someone else entirely is controlling the narrative. And just when it felt like the situation couldn't get any more complicated, another twist hit. Quiet, subtle, easy to miss. But once people noticed it, they couldn't ignore it. Because in the middle of all this chaos, there was one name that hadn't spoken at all. One person connected to that night, who stayed completely silent. And according to some viewers, that silence might be the loudest clue of all. By now, the situation wasn't just trending. It was dominating everything. Every platform, every comment section, every headline. The story had outgrown the people involved and turned into a full-blown internet war. On one side, supporters of Porsha Williams stood firm. They weren't just defending her, they were protecting her. To them, the confusion in her story wasn't suspicious. It was trauma. They flooded timelines with messages like, "Not remembering is a response to pain. Stop turning this into a conspiracy. Y'all want perfect details from someone who clearly went through something serious." The lack of memory doesn't mean the lack of truth. For them, questioning her story wasn't curiosity. It was cruelty. But on the other side, the tone was completely different. Skeptics weren't backing down anymore. In fact, they were getting louder and sharper. They pointed to Todd's statements, replaying his words like evidence in a trial. If he left, then what exactly is he being blamed for? Why does his timeline sound more structured than hers? Something about this doesn't sit right, and people are finally saying it. Debates turned into arguments. Arguments turned into full-on digital battles. And right in the middle of it all, Tasha K's questions kept circulating. Clips of her commentary started spreading faster than the original interview itself. Short edits, reaction videos, breakdown threads, each one amplifying the same idea. We're not getting the full story. And once that idea takes hold, it doesn't let go. But it didn't stop with fans. Because soon, Other voices started entering the conversation. Commentators, influencers, even people loosely connected to the industry. Some chose sides immediately. Others stayed neutral, but raised eyebrows in subtle ways. One viral post from a well-known media personality read, "This situation is a reminder that narratives move faster than facts. And once they settle, they're almost impossible to change." That line alone, shared thousands of times, because it didn't accuse anyone, but it hinted that something was off. Meanwhile, others took a more direct stance. If you speak publicly, you carry responsibility for what follows. Ambiguity at this level isn't harmless, it shapes perception. And just like that, the conversation evolved again. It wasn't just about what happened that night anymore. It became about accountability. Who's responsible for the narrative? The person who spoke? The person who stayed silent? Or the audience who turned fragments into conclusions? And then, just when it seemed like every angle had already been argued, something unexpected happened. A clip started resurfacing. Old, nearly forgotten, from before all of this exploded. At first, it didn't seem important. Just a small moment, a passing comment. But when people listened closely, really closely, they realized something chilling. Because what was said in that clip didn't match any version of the story being told now. Not Porsha's, not Todd's, not even what people thought they understood. And once that contradiction went viral, everything shifted again. Because now the question wasn't just who to believe. It was whether the truth had ever been told at all. And just when it felt like the story had reached its peak, it broke again. Not with a loud announcement, not with a direct confession, but with something far more unsettling. A contradiction that couldn't be ignored. That resurfaced clip everyone started sharing? It wasn't just different. It was completely off script. In it, Porsha Williams sounded certain. Not confused. Not unsure. Certain. Her tone was steady. Her words were clear. And most importantly, she referenced details that didn't sound like someone who didn't remember. At first, people tried to explain it away. Maybe it was taken out of context. Maybe it was before she realized what really happened. Maybe she was just trying to stay strong in that moment. But the more the clip spread, the harder it became to ignore. Because it directly clashed with everything that came after. And once that contradiction hit full momentum, the narrative didn't just crack. It fractured. Now there weren't two sides. There were multiple versions of the truth, all fighting for dominance. Some believed Porsha's memory faded over time. Others believed she was holding something back. And a growing number started asking a much darker question. What if the story changed on purpose? And that's when things took an even more unexpected turn. Because quietly, almost too quietly, Todd reacted. No full statement. No long explanation. Just a short response that people almost missed. But once they caught it, they couldn't stop replaying it. "I told y'all, something wasn't right. That was it. No names. No details. But the timing? It felt intentional. Like he had been waiting for this exact moment. And suddenly, his earlier words didn't just sound defensive anymore. They sounded like a warning. Which raises a terrifying possibility. What if Todd knew from the beginning that the story would shift? What if he stayed quiet not because he had nothing to say, but because he knew saying too much would make things worse? And if that's true, then what really happened that night might be something no one is ready to face. But here's where the silence becomes deafening. Because through all of this, through the interviews, the reactions, the speculation, the viral chaos, Kandi Burruss has said nothing. Not a denial. Not a defense. Not even a vague response. Just silence. And in a situation where everyone is speaking, that silence feels deliberate. Because sometimes, the loudest statement isn't what someone says. It's what they refuse to say. So now the story stands at a dangerous crossroads. A night no one fully explains. A story that keeps changing. A voice that warned something felt wrong. And another voice that hasn't spoken at all. And somewhere in between all of that, the truth is still missing. Or worse, it's been there the whole time, hidden in plain sight. Because if every version of this story feels incomplete, then maybe the real question isn't what happened that night. Maybe the real question is, Who benefits from keeping it unclear? Now I want to hear your take, because at this point, nothing about this story feels simple anymore. We've got Porsha Williams saying she doesn't remember what really happened. We've got Todd insisting the story doesn't add up. We've got Tasha K raising questions that no one seems ready to answer. And then there's Candy Burris, completely silent while everything unfolds. So let me ask you directly. Do you believe Porsha Williams is genuinely confused about that night, or do you think there are details she's choosing not to reveal? Is Todd telling the truth about leaving, or does he know more than he's saying? And what about Tasha K? Was she exposing cracks in the story, or making the situation even more complicated? Because here's the reality. Once a story hits the internet, it stops being just a story. It becomes a narrative. And narratives? They don't need full truth to survive. They just need people to believe them. So where do you stand? Drop your thoughts in the comments. No safe answers here. I want your honest opinion. And don't just scroll away. Read what others are saying, challenge different perspectives, see how divided this really is. Because this isn't over. Not even close. More details could surface. More people could speak out. And the version of the story you believe right now, it could change overnight. So make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because when the next twist drops, you're going to want to be here for it.